Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hi there, friend. Merry Christmas. We have for you today a special episode where we interview Agilists and Scrum Masters that have influenced us with their work, but are probably not on the top of your speakers list at your local conference. Yves, the co-host for the Tips from the Trenches audiobook, handpicked 5 groundbreaking Agilists that you will not get to hear anywhere else, but here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, you will hear from them and learn from their experience. I hope you enjoy this Christmas special that we bring to you in this 2020 special Christmas. I hope you enjoyed the show, and Merry Christmas! Hi everybody, welcome to our special Christmas 2020 episode. Today we have with us Katrina Clokie. Hi Katrina, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Katrina is joining us from New Zealand, and of course joining us from Belgium is our co-host for this special edition, as well as for the Tips from the Trenches audiobook, Yves Hanoulle. Hi Yves, welcome.
Hi Vasco, nice again to be here.
So you can find more about the Tips from the Trenches audiobook at bit.ly/audio tips 2. That's audio tips 2, all lowercase, all one word, and the last 2 is the numeral 2. All right, Yves, let's get down to it. Introduce Katrina for us.
So Katrina wrote a book that bridged the gap between testing and DevOps, or at least linked them. And for me, next to technical excellence, testing and DevOps are for me really important to make Agile succeed. And on top of that, she lives in New Zealand, which is a place I still want to visit. All this to say that I was an instant fan. I asked Lisa Crispin, that is, to introduce me so I could ask Katrina for the Agile Trenches. And now I invited her to this series because I want to know more about her.
Absolutely. So Katrina, let's dive right into it. How did you get started with Agile? Do you remember like a trigger moment or something that, kind of told you that Agile was the way to go?
This is a really interesting question, actually. So my early career, I was working in telcos, and they're a very waterfall kind of environment. And I remember expressing some frustration at the way things were run and the constraints of the wider system being explained to me over and over and over again. And then I switched jobs and worked at our national weather forecasting on their web applications and website. And it was just a complete step change in how they were writing and testing software. So my first exposure to Agile was going into that role in a completely different domain and industry under leadership who had already kind of adopted Agile in that context and were running it with their teams. It was probably about a decade ago now, and it was really exciting. Like it felt a much faster pace, much more flexible, much more collaborative, and it was really cool.
So what were kind of, if you look back at that experience at the New Zealand Weather Forecasting Institute or organization, I don't know how you guys call it, but what were the things that kind of, when you started, going into it and started to understand how it worked, what were the things that just clicked for you?
So I can give you a very concrete example. When I was working in the telecommunications industry, we did a lot of writing of test cases, mapping of test cases to requirements documents, and the ability for us to validate the sanity of kind of what we were testing was very low. Like we were quite far removed from the customer, and we often were testing things that they didn't necessarily care that much about. And then we would deploy into an integrated environment and end up getting blindsided repeatedly by different problems that were of importance to the customer. And from a testing perspective, it was a massive change to move into an Agile team where the relationship with customer was valued through the entire process. And so you would be part of like three amigos kind of sessions where the business analyst was representing the customer perspective, but you'd also have the ability to kind of reach out to the customer directly and get feedback as you were developing on, here's what we think is important. Here are the risks we think that you want us to mitigate through testing. Here's what we think you value. And having that feedback loop available and it being much more targeted and pragmatic and collaborative was a real light bulb kind of moment for me.
I want to explore that word that you just used. Very, very often during my experience as a project manager in the good old waterfall days, I heard that same word expressed to justify the methods we used back then, and that word is pragmatic. So I want to explore that. How did Agile feel pragmatic for you?
That's a great question. So for me, I think Agile has retained the link to purpose in a way that really strongly embedded waterfall processes start to lose, where something that's become an institutionalized process and people have been following without much thought for many, many years, it loses the pragmatism because people don't understand why or the purpose of it. They're unable to flex within the constraints, like to achieve that purpose in slightly different ways, because they've been given the process without the context. And so their only option is to follow the process. And that was something I really struggled with. So for me, what made it more pragmatic was that I was able to slightly alter the way I went about things as my understanding changed, because I was really tightly connected to why a specific activity needed to happen. And so you could make things quicker where you needed to and not undercut the reason for doing that thing. For me, Agile was a more pragmatic way of working because it was still tightly coupled to purpose.
Yeah, so it looks the value stayed there, but the work was maybe done in a different way, or like you said, like we used to sometimes say pragmatic way, but still caring about the value. So if you have to pick out one lesson that you care about from your personal Agile journey to share with our listeners, what would that lesson be?
I'm going to choose one that I actually ended up running workshops on. And it's something that, again, it was in my first exposure to Agile where this really became very visible. The kind of skill that sits alongside being able to be pragmatic is that sometimes you also need to be able to be persuasive. And for me, kind of the light bulb moment in Agile was realizing that because you could make decisions, you had some autonomy, you had to also bring other people on the journey when what you were about to do differed from their expectations. And when you're working in a culture of continuous improvement and things are iterative and evolving, you can't do that independently. And you can't kind of, especially like with testing, often you're the only tester in an Agile team. Sometimes there might be two, but you can't kind of go off on a tangent in your test approach. You need to bring other people with you. Early in my Agile journey, I'd never had to build any persuasive muscle. The process that I was following in previous employment was very rigid. And so I was doing what I was told and everyone was happy, right? And so the freedom came with a bunch of lessons about how I needed to operate effectively in that kind of environment. So light bulb moment in the journey would be realizing that I had to be persuasive about what my ideas were sometimes, that other people wouldn't see the same opportunities or come to the same conclusions as me without me being able to articulate my reasoning and share my observations. And it was actually a couple of jobs later that I got a really good tactic for how to do this. We had some sales training when I worked in a consulting firm, and I was like, I can apply these tools to this situation. Like, because basically it's sales. You want to share what your observations are, talk about the problems and the impact of your ideas, and then sell people on the need to do something different. It took a few years for me to get the language and mnemonic and tool to apply to that learning. But there was definitely an early light bulb moment where I was like, oh, I have a gap here in my skill set, which I need to fill.
I want to bring up a book that helped me a lot with that. It's a very old book. It was written in the Great Depression, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is a book that has been referred to quite often here on the podcast. And I would say that's mandatory reading for all Scrum Masters. And from Katrina's answer, also for testers that are in an Agile team, and they know that for sure they'll be either the only tester or they'll only have one other tester in the team. And as you said, Katrina, you'll need to bring other people along in the journey. So really practice that and flex your influencing and persuasion muscles for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, right? Like even developers, they've got numbers, but to be effective when you're trying to, like I said, the culture is one of change. You have clarity and purpose, but you want people to be learning and evolving and improving. And even developers need to be able to articulate the benefits of their ideas and influence others towards the specific solutions that they have in mind. So absolutely great book recommendation.
Yeah, it's not just Scrum Master testers, it's basically everybody in an Agile project, because it's like Katrina says, it's not about, before your role was clear. I'm not even sure that's true, but everybody knew what to do and you didn't need to convince. Everybody just had to do their job. And now with the freedom comes the responsibility to make sure that we're all on the same team and all going in the same direction. And I think that's what is the hardest part for people when they start doing in an Agile. And a lot of people, sometimes work with people who think they understand Agile, but then they don't understand this part because it takes, but the others don't do it. Well, it's your responsibility to bring them along. And we can do that together, of course, but yeah.
And the common anti-pattern that I hear about, and just heard it yesterday as I was talking to a team member, is that, I just need more authority. I just need to be able to tell others what to do. And of course, that's like shooting yourself in the foot, because the more you push, the more you get pushed back.
I see another anti-pattern with this, to Yves' point around roles and responsibilities. For me, one of the smells to watch for is when my Agile teams start asking for more role clarity. Often that's kind of a signal that someone's trying to push in a direction without influence. They're just trying to dictate. And then people feel like toes are being stepped on. And the request that comes out from those situations is, give me clarity in the boundaries of that person's role, so that I then have some ability to push back on their ideas. So it's really interesting, kind of the things that surface out from the situations where people aren't used to having to bring other people into their thinking.
This week, I think I heard also, we need Iraqi, and all bells come up with me and like, wait a minute. Because, and I like the way you put it, Katrina, it's not just about the person who's pushing too much, but also about the person who's been pushed. They ask for Iraqis because they don't know how to say no or how to react to these kind of things. And it's really important. And I think it's also important to understand their need there, because there is something wrong in the system. And typically in a transition, this is the hard part. So yes, we want to have some clarity. Unfortunately, we're living in a VUCA world where nothing is clear anymore.
Even if that is true, and I totally agree it is, I think that the anti-pattern of wanting more clarity on roles and responsibilities goes beyond let's say, the turbulence that we might be experiencing at a certain point in time. It also goes to perhaps a lack of safety. So people don't really know if they can even say no, like it's not clear to them, or because they are in a more authoritarian culture where they need to follow the leader and it's not clear for them what the leader is delegating on them and what the leader is holding. And this is made even worse because some leaders are completely arbitrary in what they delegate. One day they delegate something, the next day they don't delegate it. Some day they trust, some day they micromanage, and that is very confusing. But it also comes to something that I think Scrum Masters and all Agile coaches out there need to pay attention to. For me, it is fundamentally a a very strong red light when it comes to the ability to collaborate. The moment I hear I need to understand roles and responsibilities, I translate that in my mind immediately to I don't know, or I don't want to collaborate with these other people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I agree it's a red light, but I'm not always sure that would be what I'd attribute it to. So when people ask me for a RACI matrix, I'm like, no. But let's have a conversation about why you think you need that. And definitely the collaboration aspect is one. What we have done recently in my area is create some clarity around progression. And the request came as a RACI, but actually the reason was I don't really understand the difference between developer and senior developer. And can you help me understand what I need to do here to progress in my career? The request came as, can I have a RACI? That's not like we can't collaborate together. It's, I don't really understand how I become one of these people. It's not clear to me what their role entails. And so I think it's definitely a red flag for me, but I would want to go digging about what was actually going on, because it might be the collaborative aspect, it might be influence, people standing on toes, it might be I'm not clear on the roles of my team and how I progress into different roles. It could be a number of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great tip. Dig deeper.
I like your metaphor of red flag more than I like the red light from Vasco, because indeed the flag is not holding you back. The red light, I hope it will hold people back. And it's Dale Emery who said resistance as a resource. You have some resistance. Okay, we need to look into what is there, because for that other person, that is the reality. And so we need to figure it out.
Absolutely. So, Katrina, from all aspects of this agile universe, so Kanban, Scrum, XP, whatever that might be, what is the one aspect that you wish the teams and people you work with would understand and apply?
So we've some context. Well, I think we in my area, I have 5 different agile teams, and they're operating kind of what we call 3 pillars, which are different areas of the business that they serve. And we've just run sprint zero activities in all 3 pillars. So each pillar's had 3 weeks where they've reset their product management practice, their engineering practice, their team practice, and they've had support from a newly established leadership triad. So we've got a product owner, a lead engineer, and a people lead in each of those pillars. And each of those sprint zeros has been supported by a delivery coach. And if I'm thinking about the most valuable gap that activity is closed, it's actually quite difficult. So there's a couple that kind of float to the surface. We had got into a habit of understanding where the opportunities were to improve, but not creating dedicated time for people to execute against those improvement ideas. So from an engineering perspective, in that reset, we did quite a lot of work around reducing the toil for supporting our product by making it more maintainable and improving the testability of the product to speed up delivery cycles, which was really valuable. And then from a product management perspective, we'd really lost connection with the why and the purpose of the work that the teams were doing. And they were starting to get really focused on delivery of features without understanding who the customer was and what the problem was that they were trying to solve. So that has been another big facet of reset, is making sure they stay connected with purpose and we don't end up delivering change that doesn't actually solve the issues that we've been asked to solve, which makes us totally ineffective. So yeah, I think magic wand, it would be that really intense customer focus where we retain the connection with our customers and understand the problems that the implementation we're working in is trying to resolve. And then from an engineering perspective, that we don't just talk about the ways we can improve our system, we also invest the time required to make our product more maintainable and more testable, and the things that may get deprioritized when the delivery demand is really intense. Those are kind of the two top of mind. But that reset activity really demonstrated to me how if you give people the space and create the structure to support them, the gaps you wish for with a magic wand, often people can achieve. It's sort of empowering them and giving them some time to actually do it that is more of the issue. Yeah.
That's wonderful, because indeed a lot of people don't always realize that, we put a lot of pressure on people and to think that they will work faster, while the opposite is in a lot of cases true. We give people some time and all of a sudden then the magic happens, like you say. That's a very wonderful observation there.
Yeah, I think
that's nice.
I'd kind of challenge, I don't really like the magic wand kind of idea, especially if you're talking to someone who's in a position of authority, because they should be able to wave that wand. Like they should be able to create the environment to get the outcome that they want to see happening. I can understand, like for a Scrum Master, often you're coming in from the side and trying to influence the team towards a goal. But like I now have a domain and accountability for that domain. If someone's giving me a magic wand, I should be able to use it. Like I've got the authority, which is really nice. So it's really exciting to be able to create the environment that I wish I'd been part of in previous teams. Yeah.
And is that then your environment that you need, or the environment they need? In the sense, you understand the difference?
Both, right? Like I definitely want us, as the general manager, I want us to be solving the problems that the business are bringing to my domain. So it's really important to me that we stay connected to customer. And I don't want to end up getting called in the middle of the night because our systems aren't maintainable or we haven't been able to test them properly because of us never investing in kind of those engineering improvements, not the technical debt, but more the ideas to enhance and improve the system. So yeah, I've lost your question, but I think it's both. So it's my outcomes and their outcomes. They want to work in a team where they've got autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So me creating that environment where they've got the time and they understand why they're there seems like a good fit.
So if you think back again about the different books that you read and the different things, is there one resource? It might be a book, but it might just be also a podcast or a vlog or anything that you still go back to when thinking about developing your own agile practice?
There's a few things that spring to mind. So for agile practice specifically, the resource that I reference most often is Retromat. I find it really excellent. Even if I'm not running a retrospective, the structure and ideas of how to get the team collaborating can be applied in a lot of settings. And I find it really useful. It's a very practical resource. If I'm thinking more broadly around the leadership skills I've needed to succeed in an agile environment, there's a few really good engineering leadership books. Lara Hogan has written Resilient Leadership, I think is the title. Camille Fournier has done The Engineering Path. And then there's one other, which I can picture the title of and can't name, or picture the book cover, sorry. And then there's staples like Accelerate, where you get a really good understanding of the research and the things you should measure to understand the effectiveness of your delivery system.
Accelerate, you mean the book from Nicole Forsgren?
Yeah, correct.
Which indeed contains both the research, well, there is a story, let's put it like that, and then there is research at the end, which I really like the format that you have both there.
Do send me the links for those books, as I will put them on the show notes so that people can easily refer to them and also use them in their work. So thank you for the recommendations. We're getting close to the end. One last question though, Katrina. What's the one message that you would like to leave for the worldwide Agile community?
Wow, no pressure. I'd like to see a continued innovation against the spirit of the community. I think to our earlier conversation around long-running waterfall organizations becoming really embedded from a process perspective and disconnected from why, I see the same sorts of challenges coming into organizations that have run Agile for over a decade, where the teams have actually lost connection with the reason why some of those practices are being applied in the environment. And they start to go through routine and ritual without questioning whether it's still serving the purpose or whether there's another way of operating. So I'd be asking the Agile community to reflect, inspect, and adapt, and to be aware of driving a different kind of dogma into organizations just through the nature of it being a long-standing way of operating.
Yeah, because I think we shouldn't forget that there's a lot of new developers that have been and they run into a world where all these practices are now considered normal, but they don't understand the reasons why some of these are doing. And for them, it's like, testing or unit testing or deploying, it belongs to it, but they don't know why things are coming from. Just
Absolutely.
Like for some of my kids, a computer without internet doesn't make any sense. Well, we used to have these things, and it's a little,
and they were quite useful for us too.
Exactly, but that's my point. It doesn't look. But okay, why did we then have to add the internet? And okay, what's bringing us these values? And could it be done in a different way?
Absolutely. Maybe? Well, Katrina and Yves, it's been a pleasure to have you here on this special episode. Katrina, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Great question. I am semi-active on LinkedIn. I do have a blog, which I haven't blogged on for a couple of years, but if you're interested in my writing about testing, it's there. And then my book is available through LeanPub. It's only published as a PDF kind of or
EPUB,
Kindle book kind of download. Yeah, exactly. It's not available in a printed way, but that's the place to kind of get my book as well.
Absolutely. And we'll put the link to all of those on the show notes so that all of you can easily find Katrina's work and read her book for sure. What's the name of the book, Katrina?
It's a practical guide to testing in DevOps.
Practical Guide to Testing in DevOps. Great. Well, thank you very much, Katrina. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Yves. Thank you, both of you, for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this special episode on continuous delivery. If you did, please share this episode with your colleagues and spread the message about continuous delivery and how it can help your team and your business.